Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Andy. I wanted all of you to know that there was going to be a test after this meeting, so I'll go ahead and call the City Council budget workshop to order. Cheryl, would you do the roll call, please?
Councilmember Steinmeier?
Yes.
Canna?
Yes.
Bash?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Hoffman?
Yes.
Mayor Newton?
Yes.
All present.
Thank you. Kevin, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Ready, and I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We will now have the presentation of the draft fiscal year 2017-2018 operating budget. Gina?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it over to Gina, who's going to lead us in the study session discussions. I do want to make a couple of housekeeping comments to set the stage for the budget presentations. So this is the first of what we plan to be at least 2 budget workshops. If more is needed, we'll do them. Tonight's study session is on the operating budget, the preliminary operating budget for fiscal year 2017-2018. There is a lot of information to go over this evening, so it is most likely that we won't get through all of the information in the 2-hour time period that we have. If we don't get through them, we will carry over this information to the next study session, which will be 2 weeks from today. And following that conclusion of the operating budget discussions, we will then be discussing the capital improvement program budget for the next fiscal year as well. I realize that you're now seeing the documents for the first time, and there is a lot of information to digest through this process. I'm going to encourage you to take the document home with you. Study it over the next 2 weeks. When we reconvene in 2 weeks' time, hopefully you will have a little more appreciation for it, and then we'll be in a position to ask additional questions. That's why we'll carry over to the next study session. In terms of the preliminary budget itself, is a status quo budget, and what that means is what you'll be looking over tonight, budget requests that is intended to keep the current city programs and city functions running at existing levels. There are no new programs anticipated in the numbers that you're going to be looking at tonight. The process is continuous. Over the next month or so, before we bring the budget back to you for adoption, we'll continue to look at the numbers and scrub the numbers and make adjustments as appropriate as more information becomes available. The budget will not be finalized until the 9th to be presented to you for approval. So with that, I will turn it over to Gina, and she will begin the presentation.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. Staff has prepared the preliminary budget for fiscal year 17-18, and we have a slide presentation for you. We're going to be carrying this out in a process of, I'll be doing an overview and then handing it over to the departments, and they'll prepare and comment on their own budgets, their operating budgets. This is an overview of the budget presentation today. We'll be looking at the operating budget highlights, general fund revenue and expenditures, fund balance, and detail of the water, sewer, and gas tax funds, as well as departmental budgets. And then finally, supplemental budget request and proposed new fees. These are not included in this particular preliminary budget at this time. The total estimated budget for fiscal year 17-18 revenues is 18.4 million and total estimated expenditures are 19.7 million. This has resulted in a structural deficit of $1.3 million in the general fund. Included in this operating budget are no changes to non-safety programs or employee levels. There's a 9% annual adjustment for sheriff services. Additionally, we've added one traffic enforcement deputy and one community services officer. The CAL FIRE budget is increasing by 8.6% as compared to the amended budget and 11% as compared to estimated year-end. The budget continues to provide funding to pay down liability for post-employment healthcare costs as well as paid and retiree healthcare. We are currently funding the past due employer pension rate increases that occur. City employees are also paying the full rate of the portion of the CalPERS pension contribution. The preliminary budget does not include salary adjustments for employees, and if you want to make a note in your presentation, it doesn't say does not include, it says does. So I just want to make it clear that this does not include any salary adjustments. This does include increased water utility costs for the general fund, and we have discontinued the $75,000 transfer to the NPDS fund due to an available fund balance in that fund this year. The general fund revenue budget, I'll go into a little bit of detail here, and then a little more detail later. We are looking at about $138,000 increase in sales tax for this next year. And if you recall, we increased sales tax at mid-year by $350,000. So we have seen an uptick in construction as well as auto sales in the city. We don't see that increasing any more than $138,000 at this time. In terms of property tax is increasing by $43,000. We did come to you at mid-year with over $100,000 increase as well. Assessed values are increasing, which is causing property tax to go up slightly. We are also seeing an increase in vehicle license fees of 3.8%. And that in total, from mid-year to the current budget, is an increase of over $150,000. Lease income, we're anticipating additional sell side increases due to Brian's efforts, and we are also, of course, losing the library lease income. In terms of franchise fees, we're seeing a slight increase of 1.7%. We are proposing an increase in our waste management fees. But we do have California Rehabilitation Center removing themselves from the city's franchise environment and going with a new provider as mandated by the state of California. So we've lost a little bit of revenue there, about $50,000. Overhead reimbursements, and we're anticipating loss of $108,000 from the Department of Finance. We're currently in negotiations with them regarding their desire not to fund our pension liabilities in the successor agency. And that's about $108,000 we're getting annually from the state of California. Projected decrease of 23% in community development is a natural conservative view of our building processes and activities for the next year. We anticipate coming back to you as developments solidify. Next, we've got water fund highlights. The water fund for 16-17 opened up with a $754,000 deficit last year at this time. And actually, that's our capital number as well. And we're anticipating it to end in fiscal year 16-17 with a $1.9 million working capital balance. The financial outlook of the water budget improved, as you're aware, as a result of restructured water rates implemented in January, the sale of stored water for $1.1 million, transfer of $700,000 from the water capital fund, and expenditure reductions mainly from purchased water costs. Including the impact from the rate changes, the 1718 water fund revenues of $10.7 million are $10.7 million, and total projected expenditures are $10 million. This is going to result in a $2.7 million balance in working capital balance in June 30th of 2018, providing for a minimum operating reserve, rate stabilization reserve, and allocation for CIP. Initial funding for this particular, for these particular areas will occur with the operating fund balance, the rate stabilization reserve, and CIP water projects will be based on the available working capital at current. On July 1st, we're going to have some fixed charges and consumption rate increases per the adoption of the rate scheduled for the next 5 years. And finally, with all this being said, we do have $31.9 million in outstanding CIP projects within the water fund. Fundamentally, we are improving significantly as a result of the approved changes, and we do have a lot of outstanding projects. Sewer fund highlights. The projected sewer revenues are $7.5 million and expenditures are $6.2. We are not making any rate structure changes over the next year or rate increases. And the working capital balance is $5.6 million and $6.9 million going forward in terms of year end. So we're looking at this year $5.6 million balance, and then end of 2018 $6.9. This does not include a transfer from the capital projects fund, and just as in the water, we have over $18.8 million in outstanding sewer CIP projects. And Chad will be going into a little more detail on these in his operating plans. Sure.
Under just general fund highlights, with lease income, anticipated increase in cell site revenues offset by library leasing, that the possibility does exist that we could, I believe, lose the cell site revenues with the bill that's going through committee at the state. Is there a way we could figure out what that amount is? Possibly we should allow for it. At least I'd like to know what that amount is. And I know it's probably in the big book, but we should be aware that we could lose those revenues.
New revenues.
Or is it any new revenues?
New revenues are about $96,000. Yeah, and the question I guess would be for John, if we already have agreements that are 20, 25-year leases, if the state mandates something, does that affect our leases?
I mean, what obviously we have potential being an argument with providers, but in general, I don't think that the bill has the legal ability to affect existing contract as a constitution. But doesn't mean we'll try.
And right now it's just in committee. A question on franchise fee.
Just one more note,
Sorry.
Mr. Mayor. We have one that's processing right now.
Okay.
That'll be an additional $36,000. We did not add it to the budget, but it's in process, so it'll probably be a mid-year adjustment.
Probably should hurry. On the franchise fee for the CRC, is that 1.76 increase? Is that because their new provider, hauler, is charging less than Waste Management did?
Yeah, I believe it's that.
Because we are getting the franchise fees.
We're not sure what is going to happen. The budget simply at this particular time does not include potential franchise fee that we can collect from the new provider. We are required by the city ordinance to pay our franchise fee. However, the state is the state, and sometimes we don't always tell them what to do. So we are conservatively at this point removing that portion from the budget. And then if that clears up, we'll bring back the final budget and put another budget.
And how will we know that, or when will we know that if we'll be able to collect fees, franchise fees?
We are still making contact with the new provider. And that's, once that process is complete, we know what the opposition is going to be like.
Thank you, Gina. Any other questions?
Also on that same topic, Gina, your overall franchise fee, now that's only if the new provider for CRC comes on board, but Waste Management's will also increase on July 1st, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so is that figure in here too already, or doesn't reflect that 1.7?
The rate increase is reflected in the 1.7 as well as the removal of the CRC.
Okay.
It's in it. And just to, the total for the cell sites is $166,000.
That would be only.
36,000.
Not that, that's not. It hasn't been approved yet.
Thank you, Gina.
A little bit more detail here. This chart reflects the percentage change between the year-end estimate and the preliminary budget for each of the major revenue categories, all the revenue categories. And as we're looking at each category, I wanted to emphasize that the change from, and I'll discuss a little bit about mid-year, in terms of property tax, last year, mid-year we did come with actually a $62,000 change, and we are increasing by an additional $43,000. Mid-year was $315,000, and we're increasing by an additional $138,000. So as a result of those adjustments at mid-year and slight increases, what you'll find in this particular section is that we're a bit flat with our revenues. We've reached a certain capacity at this point in terms of the taxes that we receive. And we're looking forward as a result of the economic development that we do have to get a little bit more out of this next year. And you can see the franchise fees are 1.7%, and the difference between the amended budget and the preliminary budget, that's the difference in CRC. So overall, between year end, which is, again, has a bit more revenue in it than we projected, which is a good thing. We were still looking at less than 0.17% decrease in revenues for 17-18.
Take away from here, from my perspective, is looking at this total general fund revenue. It is very close or at plateau. Meaning there is, if you look at this revenue categories, there is not that much room for general fund revenues to grow going into the future. I mean, sales tax, currently we are both where we were prior to the recession, this is $6.7 million, and the big sales tax generators, such as the auto dealers, we are currently all filled, and they are all doing well. We don't expect them to do more than what they are doing today. Sales property tax, there is not that much construction, new construction going on here. The small increase we are receiving is from basically the CPI adjustment that the assessor's office applies to existing properties on an annual basis. Again, that is our challenge going into the future, is that our revenues have essentially hit a ceiling. And on the other hand, expenditures, as you see, continue to go up through pass-through costs and other costs that the city doesn't actually have control of. We need to keep an eye on this because it's part of the challenge that we're facing going forward.
This is a graphic of the revenues, and I wanted to point out that 59% of our revenues are tax-based related: property tax, sales tax, and motor vehicle license fees. And that's a total revenue for the general fund of $18.3 million.
Back on the previous one, actually. Charges for services, we dropped 23.38%.
Correct. That's a conservative view. That has our development fees in there. And what we do is we've looked, as you see in the column, we have 1.6 million estimated for year end. So it's really the development that has occurred over the year. We have money collected as a result of that. We're anticipating more based on permits and everything that we've accumulated. But for next year, we may not have those signed development agreements going on at this point in time. I can ask Steve to share any more insight to that.
I need more details, signed development agreements.
So basically our permits and such were estimated lower.
Yeah, we had a lot of activity this year because of the shopping center that's going in. And we, based upon projects that have been approved, we don't anticipate we're going to see the same level of activity next year. We might, we hope so, but it's projecting out. I can't promise that we will.
So hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Thank you.
I'll quickly go through these slides. I've mentioned their characteristics for this next year. We are assuming a 2.6% increase in the assessed valuation, as Andy mentioned, CPI increase for property tax. Sales tax is increased due to auto sales and construction materials. And our assumptions are based on our sales tax projections. We've some excellent information on both property tax and sales tax. Other taxes include public safety sales tax, property transfer, and TOT. We are projecting a 2.1% increase in transient occupancy tax revenue, and that's increasing as occupancy has been over the last year. Franchise fees includes cable television, electric, gas, and refuse franchise fees. Overall, as a group, we're seeing a decrease in electric and gas franchise receipts. And that is that is not going to change, is my understanding. There's been adjustments with how those paper items are calculated.
One other thing to point out here is electric franchise fee went down significantly. And what that means is people are using less electricity, in particular with the installation of solar panels. Because that electric franchise fee is based on actual revenues that are collected in the city. As people use less, then that revenue is going down, and has been going down for the last few years.
PLF, motor vehicle license fee is increasing 3.8%. Based on the state's estimates. And interest and lease income, this includes the cell towers and civil lakes payments. And we again seeing an offset in the loss of delivery. Purchase for services, as Steve mentioned, we are looking at a 23.3% decrease as compared to year end due to the timing of permit activities or reduction in activities. Other revenues includes our VEMS subscription system, dog license, penalties, fire inspection fees. We're seeing a decrease in 3.27%, and the majority of that appears to be as a result of our 3-year dog license renewals that have hit a high this last year. More individuals are choosing a 3-year dog license. Overhead transfers. These are reimbursements from other funds to the general fund, and again, we're seeing a decrease in this mainly because we're taking a conservative view that the state will not contribute to pay for our unfunded liability, pension, and retiree health costs as a result of correlated to the successor agency. But we're hopeful to be adding that figure back in, if not more, if Andy has his way. General fund expenditures. From this pie chart, you will see that we have 54% of our budget allocated, of the 19.7 million allocated to public safety. Our general fund expenditures, we'll get into a little detail here. We've got contractual obligations increasing. As we mentioned earlier, 9% increase in police protection. We're also adding an additional deputy and CSO. Fire suppression, CAL FIRE has a proposed MOU agreement being signed hopefully as we speak, I think. And that's going to increase the budget by about $423,000. As we move down, we have various other increases that the departments will be discussing in their presentations, for a total of $1.7 million in increases for the next year as compared to the year-end, as compared to the amended budget. And that's a 9.7% increase. And I'd like to detail out these increases. One of the increases is the unfunded accrued liability, UAL, for $141,000. Employee health insurance is increasing by $22,000. Our utility charges are increasing by $249,000 related to our water increases. CAL FIRE contract is increasing by $419,000, and these are nets included. We pulled out these items, so they may net out overall with other adjustments in those particular budgets. Sheriff increases, $703,000 as compared to the amended budget. Contractual increases, $115,000, and liability insurance, $101,000, for a total of $1.7 million. And that 1.775 number, if you refer back to the prior slide, it is higher than the net total, but these are just the specific increases. I've broken this down into categories to show how this is distributed. 24% of the budget is related to salaries and benefits and employee-related expenses. And 61% of the budget is related to contractual and professional services. And again, it's a total of $1.7 million change in these particular areas, the majority being in contractual and professional services. Now we'll go on to fund balance and the trend over time. This particular chart shows that in 16-17, revenues exceeded expenditure. Today, we're looking at that happening at year-end, 18.4 million in revenues, 17.7 in expenditures, with fund balance at $10.7 million. If we project forward to the preliminary budget to year-end June 2018, 18.3 million in revenues, 19.7 in expenditures, and 9.3 million in reserves. And as you can see, revenues, as Andy indicated, are flat. We aren't anticipating any great increases in our sales tax base or revenue base in the near future. In terms of the projected fund balance, this is how it calculates. Our audited fund balance was $10 million. We're estimating for the current year 18.4 million, revenues 17.7 million, expenditures, and that will contribute $635,000 to the fund balance. Our estimated July 1st fund balance is $10.7 million. Excuse me, July 1st, 2017 fund balance. Our estimated revenues for next year, 18.3 million, expenditures 19.7, for a total of 1.3 million. Structural deficit for the general fund for 17-18. Our estimated fund balance will be $9.3 million as a result of that proposal. We just want to indicate that if you look at the 10 million at June 30th, 2016, and you subtract out, net everything out, the net total is a $695,000 decrease in fund balance over the next 2-year period. I'll briefly go over the water fund, a little detail. The water fund, as we mentioned, the revenues are at 10.7 million, expenditures are 10 million. The projected revenues over expenditures of 761,000 will be added to the estimated working capital at June 30th, 2018, for a total of $2.7 million. The water fund working capital balance will grow over the next 5 years and provide funding for the operating reserve and rate stabilization reserves. Our current inventory of CIP projects in the water fund, 31.9 million. Our operating reserve estimate for the rate study is 2.1 million, and our rate stabilization reserve is 2 million. The target to achieve that is by 2026. So by year-end June 2018, the Public Works Director will be looking at the fund balances available and attributing them to either CIP projects, portion to operating reserve, or rate stabilization reserves. Summary of the domestic water sales for the water fund. Domestic water sales we're projecting to be 9.6 million. That's an increase from what we were projecting for the current year of 8.3 million. Irrigation sales are 803,000, or 8%, and that's higher than the 787,000 we're projecting for year end. And other revenues are $343,000. In the current year budget for the water fund, in the other revenue slice, it would include a $700,000 transfer from the capital fund and a $1.1 million purchase of water from Fontana Water. The water fund expenditures are based on the following. The purchased water costs are estimated and based on obligations under take or pay purchased water contracts. So you'll see a fully funded obligation in the contractual line item for water, or purchased water. The increase you're going to see is related to valve and hydrant maintenance, GIS maintenance, one-time increase in employee training, and purchases of new water equipment. The debt service is decreasing by $106,000 due to the payoff of the EDA or Drought Act loan. And we'll show that in the next slide. Salary and benefits, which also includes employee-related expenses, is 14%. And you'll see as we move to maintenance and supplies, $44,000 in increases as a result of the areas I mentioned. And contractual services are increasing by $62,000. The purchased water utilities, that's fully funded contract that we have, and what you'll see is at year end, it's down to $5 million. That's projection, but we budget fully for the contract at the beginning of the year. Internal service funds are increasing due to vehicle repairs, anticipated repairs, and purchases related to components of those vehicles, as well as accessory equipment. And that's the increase of 16.9% versus year end. It's the breakout of the water fund expenditures. We have a pie chart. Of course, the purchased water is the majority of the budget, $5.9 million. Or a $10 million, expenditure budget.
Gina, can you go back to the last slide just to make sure that the next one back? So you're looking at the purchased water increase of 19%. Again, I think she did point out at the beginning of the presentation that we budget based on the worst case scenario. And what that means is we budget for the entire requirement under the take or pay contract. but in fact, our expenditures are traditionally much lower than that. So you look at this fiscal year 2016-2017, we are looking to spend $5 million as against nearly $6 million of budget. So most of the increase you're seeing in the water fund in the proposed budget relates to that particular line item. Of course, we are not expecting to spend that money, but we are required if we have to.
And I did neglect to mention, we do have some building repairs that are included in the maintenance supplies and service rentals line. So it is increasing due to some building repairs that are there. And now we'll move on to the sewer fund. Sewer fund is projected to have $7.5 million in revenues for 17-18, and expenditures as compared to the 16-17 budget include sewer line cleaning, root chemical treatment, roach treatment, grease treatment, electrical maintenance, GIS data collection, and mapping services, and purchase of new sewer equipment and employee training. Expansion of the Western Riverside County Regional Wastewater Authority treatment plant is anticipated to be completed and operational in the next budget year. No impact of the treatment plant expansion is reflected in this preliminary budget at this time. Now, the expenditures are anticipated to be $6.2 million in the sewer fund as compared to the $7.5 million in revenue. The change in expenditures is about 15.5%, with a percentage increase in line with the maintenance supplies. Again, that's related to all the treatments that we discussed earlier. And contractual services are increasing as well. I don't know if Chad has anything else to mention on this particular slide. Okay. This is a breakout of the sewer fund expenditures. Majority of it is contractual services and debt service for a $6.2 million budget. I'll quickly go to gas tax funds.
Gina,
Yes.
question on the RIPWA expansion. No impact of the treatment plant is reflected. Do we anticipate a financial impact?
No, we don't. We actually anticipate we may see a reduction in our overall cost once the plant goes into, I think may actually happen in December. They're actually projecting maybe $150,000 in reduction of our cost for the year, maybe a little bit more. But that's if they actually get it started. So we're budgeting as if it hasn't done, which is the higher amount, et cetera, et cetera. So if anything, it's going to go down slightly.
Thank you.
The gas tax fund, as you're aware, is having an increase of about 41% as a result of SB 1, or the Road Repair and Accountability Act of 2017. We anticipate total expenditures to be $737,000, which provides increased funding for tree trimming and removal. The current fund balance in the gas tax fund is $661,000. And our estimate is based on the League of California Cities estimate that they provided for us. I should mention too, it also is eligible for road maintenance, signal maintenance, pothole repairs, traffic lights, and utilities, and street cleaning. Now, can we move on?
So what about the other monies? Is that something reflected in the budget, the other monies that they got through the SB?
It is reflected in the revenues, the additional $223,000.
I think the other money, assuming you're referring to,
Is the money that-
part of that package includes certain earmarks for specific projects. For example, the Hannah Avenue Bridge project is earmarked to receive $6.3 million to help for the local matching fund requirement. which is being funded through federal funds. So that part of a related SB 132 provides that funding. And that is not included in this operating budget. That is money that will come to the city separately outside of the.
What about the additional funding? There was other funding along with that too.
Well, based on this data here, we are looking for 223,000. When the entire SB 1 provision goes into effect, the city is expected to receive an increase of about 630,000.
Right.
But
That's not reflected.
Yeah, that's not reflected here yet because it's going to phase in over a couple of years.
And then, because we'd already pretty much had an agreement with Tom to fund our matching, are we going to somehow lobby for those funds?
Yes, and I will provide an update on that at the end of the city council meeting tonight.
Great, thank you.
Andy, are those the funds that, the deal they made, is that essentially going to go into the capital improvement fund only, or rather than general fund, correct?
There's two portions of the deal that was made.
Okay.
Part of it is regular tax, gas tax funding, which is the one that will provide and fully phase in $630,000 in additional revenue to the city. There is a separate deal in a way of earmark, and that is where we will get the $6.3 million for the local matching fund. That is for the project. Okay. So it's a one-time money for $6.3 million that is earmarked for the project. And will be drawn down as the project gets built.
And now we'll move on to expenditures by departments and programs, and staff will be presenting their portion of the budgets. Start off with, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. Tonight I'll be discussing our increase in our contract rate and overhead budget, operating budget. So for FY 16-17, the mid-year budget included the the mid-year funding for an additional dedicated deputy to do traffic enforcement as well as a CSO or community service officer. However, those positions were not filled, so that funding was not expended. Those positions are likely to be funded at the beginning or shortly after the new fiscal year. The FY 16-17 contract did include a 7% increase for projected cost and a 5.13% contract rate increase. The general fund portion of the contract has been reduced by $100,000 charged to the SLESF grant, which stands for the Supplemental Law Enforcement Services Funding Grant by the state of California. Our projected base contract increase is estimated at 9% for FY 17-18. And FY 17-18 includes a full year of adding the dedicated positions for the traffic enforcement deputy as well as the additional CSO position. And that will cost approximately $414,000. In the overall comparison, the amended budget to preliminary, the increase is overall $700,00609, which is equivalent to an overall 12.60% increase. Something I'd like to add, for the last several years, the city has funded traffic enforcement for the Sheriff's Department, and that's been $100,000 for the last several years. What we are going to do is we're going to no longer use that for overtime. That will be moved into funding the dedicated traffic enforcement deputy. Any questions?
I'm just curious what the rest of the council feels. I like that $100,000 expenditure for additional traffic enforcement, the overtime on that.
To maintain it?
To maintain it.
Something the city manager and I discussed. Norco, in comparison to other surrounding cities, did not receive the OTS, the Office of Traffic Safety grant. It's because our collision statistics were lower. And as a result, we did not get that funding. So working with the city manager, we also added a $35,000 annual cost so we could keep those operations going. Those operations include DUI saturation patrols, pedestrian safety crosswalk operations, as well as gridlock. Those have been very productive. So what we've talked about doing is maintaining that $35,000 for those specialized programs. We always hope that we'll get the grant again, but again, those are based on traffic statistics, traffic collision statistics. So it made sense at the time to roll over that $100,000 into funding the deputy traffic enforcement position, but maintaining that $35,000 for those special operations should we not receive the grant again.
Okay. And yeah, just one thing real quick, but until the new deputy is on, and the CSO are on board, we are still doing the additional overtime traffic enforcement?
It is still continuing and will continue through the end of this fiscal year.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. Ted?
Eric, how much, out of $100,000, how much did you actually spend for this fiscal year for your projects? Did you actually spend it all or?
We will come out nearly zero. We always come in within a couple of $100
Okay, I just sometimes.
remaining.
Remaining, okay. Thank you.
So I want to make sure I'm clear. So what we're doing is discontinuing the 100,000 and we're actually hiring a traffic enforcement deputy that will cover that same position, or are we deleting the?
Basically, that $100,000 will help fund that position. It won't completely fund it, but it will help fund that dedicated traffic enforcement deputy. And basically, he will be doing all traffic enforcement. He won't be investigating the crimes. He won't be investigating traffic accidents.
He's a dedicated officer. It's not an overtime situation.
Correct.
It's now a dedicated officer.
That's correct.
Okay. Until starting next fiscal year.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you, Eric.
We'll move to the fire department.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. Fiscal year 2016/2017 estimated expenditures for CAL FIRE will be lower than adopted budget due to delayed MOU increases, providing a savings of $84,296 that was recognized in the mid-year amendment. 2017-18 budget expenditures are increasing by $420,984 as compared to the amended budget due to projected MOU increases. Additional funding of $50,662 for the fire engine replacement is provided through the equipment replacement fund. We'd like to add that currently we're in ratification for an MOU agreement, and the whole reason this came about is due to minimum wage increases. Our seasonal level firefighters that come on in April and typically are laid off in December were impacted by the minimum wage increases. And what that did was compact all the other salary ranges of CDF firefighters. So we have now seasonal firefighters that are making as much, if not more, as our permanent firefighter team paramedic classifications are on their engine captains. That has created a huge issue for morale as well as sustainability and retention of our firefighter paramedic ranks. Now that we've seen the Great Recession recede and everyone has started to hire, we are experiencing a mass exodus of our experienced firefighters going to other agencies that pay substantially more. This has even hit us again today. The three that I know that are fire captains that have been here 20 years are all leaving to go to a city that's close to us, just down the freeway, on May 20th, to sit in the back seat and work as firefighters. So I just wanted to relay to council where these increases are coming from. They're coming from the minimum wage increase with our entry-level firefighters, being compacted with the veteran firefighters, and the need to spread those ranks and classifications out in salary is where we sit today. If you recall last year, this time last year, the council approved a 2-year contract extension for CAL FIRE, and in that meeting, or in that contract, the estimate for next year, 17-18, was $4,171,655. The new number on the contract is $292,000. So paper, it looks like a giant increase. However, it truly, from what council already extended last year's $120,000 increase over what you anticipated to pay with the MOU negotiations. They're still under ratification, they're still voting, still counting votes, it's not approved yet. We're not there yet. So, and I'd also like to remind council that every year we've been under budget. Last year we were roughly $320,000 under budget. Every year preceding that, with contract for the city runner budget. The reason that is because we calculate every position at top step. So it gives us flexibility, because you'll never have every position that's contracted in the city as top step, most veteran firefighter. And that gives us flexibility to come in under budget and not come back to council and ask for more money. So that's where we sit today, and I just wanted you to know what's behind the MOU increases and why that number is missing. With that, I'll take any questions.
On this 50,000 for fire engine replacement, that's a yearly payment, right? And just out of curiosity, how much does a new fire engine cost, like the one we just bought?
So it's about $510,000 right now.
Okay. So,
and the way that program is built is you pay it for 10 years and then you receive a new fire engine. So our fire engines are designed to be frontline, in service, running first due out of the fire station for 10 years. After 10 years, we remove them from frontline service and put them into reserve status. So if the front line breaks, you always have a fire engine you know. And you see that at 47 today at Hillside. The old white engine's still there, and they're actually riding it today because the brand new one's getting warranty work. So that's how it's designed, and it's split per engine that you contract, or per fire station that you contract. So it's $50,000 per station.
well, I was just curious how much a new engine costs, so they're replaced every 10 years.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I think I want to make a correction. The $50,000 is for 2 fire engines. The contribution is $25,000 for 1 fire engine.
My apologies.
So, yeah, so clearly there's a huge benefit to the city.
And that's a volunteer program the city opted into.
Yeah, participating.
They can choose to have their own fire engine and own it and replace it on their own and have that bill when it comes, but this city's decided to partake in that program.
You made me nervous there when I said, well, how did it change from 1 to 2 to 1 fire?
Any other questions? Thank you, Chief.
We are still way ahead of where we were when we had our own fire. I mean, nobody likes to see increases, and but we're still financially way ahead. So I'm pretty pleased. And I'm very, very pleased with the service. But in fact, I wish instead of police on this, you would put sheriff or deputies. Could we maybe make that change?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
What would you like to call the fire department? Big dogs.
Friends of the sheriffs.
Did you want me to talk about the photo ops?
You won't get fired.
Moving to fiscal and support services. The anticipated change in the budget is 2% between the amended budget of $1.3 million and the preliminary budget of $1.36 million. The adjustment is based on pension increases between the amended budget and the preliminary budget, as well as increased training opportunities that we have with the new employee coming, and a minor increase in some contractual services. The difference between the year-end and the preliminary budget are in salary and benefit savings. We do budget at a high level, and we have recently hired, as compared to the prior year, recently hired new employees, different pension levels as well. Any questions?
A comment. One of the sad things about this section, and I think I spoke to it a couple of years ago, is these are kind of the unsung heroes. They sort of work in the little back room and they count all the beans and stuff, and I just wanted to know we appreciate them.
Definitely tell them.
Next, city manager, and Andy will be presenting the city manager, economic development, and human resources section.
Okay. The city manager's division, the only change in this budget is two things. One is the increase related to pension benefits. And secondly, this year, the department of the division, we added one computer Surface notebook that is available for use, and as a result of that, the department is carrying on additional allocation for computer replacement as well as for computer operations, IT function. That's really the only change in this budget.
And we'll ask Cheryl for her budget.
For the city clerk's office, the change for fiscal year 2017-2018 is about 6.87% due to increased pensions, training, and increases in the publishing costs for the municipal code. Are there any questions?
Economic development.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, for this current fiscal year, our expenditures are significantly below our projected budgeted amounts, largely due to tight-fisted conservative management of our marketing resources. In the coming fiscal year, we will be spending about 2.5% less than the current fiscal year, also due to managing these marketing and promotional budgets that are, we like to use them only when we have to. We don't like to spend them frivolously. Also, for the third consecutive year, we'll be funding the city's presence and not only attendance but exhibit at the ICSC conference, which is really our greatest single marketing expense during the year. Be happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Roger, I appreciate your conservatism on this and your being frugal, but at this point, I think the economic development is probably going to be our greatest revenue getter over the next 12 to 24 months, and somehow or another, I don't mind you being frugal, I love that, but we got to, is the old adage, we got to spend money to make money. So, I mean, I don't know about the rest of the council, but I appreciate you being cheap, but let's make sure we get a good ROI on this thing so we can get more revenue generating businesses in this thing.
I can come up with plenty of ideas on how to spend some money, yes.
Well, I'm just, the investment part of it.
No, I agree.
And I appreciate your being frugal. I just think that we need to, don't get cheap on this thing.
The point is well taken. In fact, the city manager and I were discussing our upcoming ICSC promotion, and we talked about, while being respectful in our handling of money, make it a more sophisticated presentation, and make sure that we let people know that the city of Norco is a progressive, contemporary, sophisticated operation that can, with the ability to welcome all kinds of new businesses to town.
Just one other comment here in terms of why we're saving money is that a lot of the marketing materials we used to use in the past also is now done in-house. Now somebody, I think we're actually putting out more than before. It so happens that we are spending less because we have staff that has that ability to provide.
That is absolutely true. The money we used to send to graphic design firms stays in-house now.
I appreciate that, thank you. I just don't want to get the idea that, okay, we want to make sure we keep these businesses interested in our city. And I guess I just want to see a good ROI on it, that's it.
Absolutely, I appreciate that.
I'd like to, for the ICSC, before we go, I'd like to have some strategy meetings and maybe talk about exactly who we're going to go after and stuff. I'm sure you've already thought of that.
We have already scheduled one with
Yeah, so that we can get behind it. You know, just along with Ted, I was thinking the same thing, but I also understood we were doing a lot of in-house. During the Great Depression, there's the myth that companies pulled back. And the truth is the companies that were successful were the ones that actually doubled down on their advertising. And so I think that if we can find ways to utilize that extra 2.52%, it might be good. So, thank you.
Move to Human Resources.
Again, the only change in the Human Resources Division is is as a result of salary adjustments. If you recall, during the media, we did a reclassification of the position here, and that has just to bring it up to where comparable positions should be. And additionally, we are seeing the same thing that we see in every department, and that's the cost increase related to pension benefits. So that's a combination of those two factors is what you see is what they go up.
And non-departmental.
The non-departmental, this is where we budget for all those operating costs that we cannot tie to specific departments. Some of the things that we include here are citywide dues and memberships, retiree medical insurance, which is paid on a pay-as-you-go basis, as well as the unfunded accrued liability for insurance premiums, claim settlements, as well as insurances foresee workers' comp and general liability programs. The increase that you're seeing here is increase related to the general liability insurance coverage. However, every year since the last probably 13 years, we have received a rebate back from Public Entity Risk Management Authority based on actual experience. We are budgeting the entire amount, and we do expect that we'll receive the rebate back sometime during the mid-year budget process, and that would reduce the amount in this budget, in this department.
I would like to vote that we just erase this and give all these things to Brian Petrie and let him put them into this Park and Rec budget. I'm sorry, he's not laughing.
Because he knows that these are the things that Travis is saying.
Yeah. Just kidding, Michelle.
Now to Parks and Recreation.
Thank you, Gina. And you'll notice in the 2016-17 budget, our expenditures are a little higher as we have some improvements we did to the gym. We also collect a fund, a maintenance fund for every activity per person that helps to offset those costs. We're replacing the swamp coolers that have slowly declined in there, and that will really help as we move into our summer youth basketball program. So those are some of the improvements that are being done on the facility as we speak. The other issue is the 2017-18 budget expenditures. You'll see about a 4.5% increase there, higher than the previous fiscal year, but you also have an offset in revenues, an increase in revenues to support that particular activity and increase. Moving over to our youth and teen services budget, 731, you'll see a decline in here as part of our preliminary budget, our year-ending budget to our amended budget. Remember, this fund brings in what it spends. So if you take a look at the revenue side, what our projections are versus what our expenditures are, you'll see that they balance out. So we never exceed the expenditures to the revenues in this particular area. You'll see us coming back next year in our projections at about where we were in the 16-17 budget, and also our revenues at that particular projected area, same amount. A lot of our impacts to this particular budget, again, as which was mentioned before, are because we rely heavily on part-time staff, minimum wage increases were part of our increases in here. That was part of our biggest expense to that particular budget. Moving into the park operation maintenance budget, the 733 budget, you'll see a significant increase from the amended to the estimated year-end to the preliminary budget. This particular budget increase is related to the water. When we projected at mid-year what we thought our year ending would be, there is some adjustments based on that. As you know, we have transferred all water costs from the water fund into those various departments that have those utility costs. So our increase is related to utility cost here. So that's why you see the higher increase to the parks budget, and that's particularly because of the utility costs there. You also will see some additional revenues. Those revenues are also tied into our cell sites. Since the cell sites are in the parks, we identified those revenues originally into the cell site in the bottom line of those particular locations at those parks. Moving into the 735 senior services budget, the 16-17 year budget expenditures are higher due to increasing expenses associated with our party partners and utilities. We had underestimated last year, or the current year we're in, as far as our utilities, and we're finding our utilities are running higher. Also, if we have a warm summer, just as a note, we do open that as a cool center, so we will run that facility when it is typically would be closed, or longer hours based on our agreement with the county that we are a cool center. And that allows our seniors to be able to, where they would not use air conditioning at home or at one of the senior housing units next to the senior center, they can go there and they can find refuge in the cool center. The 17-18 year budget proposed expenditures are higher. A lot of that is related to our minimum wage again and our changes in benefits related to the increases for PERS. You'll see our revenues are a little less due to the elimination of the Party Partners program donation. As you know, that the Assembly of God Church has been a very big donor for us. This last year was the last year of that donation. So we've actually kept the program intact, and those expenditures are part of that. We just don't have the revenues to offset those. 737, this budget it contains all public facilities in the city, as well as the George Ingles Equestrian Event Center. This is inclusive of both fire stations and police station. So you'll see that our 16-17 estimated year-end expenditures are higher due to, again, here's another situation, and this particular budget is affected by this every year. We don't budget probably where we could be budgeting, one, because of infrastructure costs. And I'll be honest with you, we roll the dice a lot of times that an AC doesn't go bad. But we right now are replacing 3 AC units in this fiscal year. We've started a program this last year due to council's direction to start to replace particular AC units at City Hall. We have 24 units. We're replacing 3 this year. Out of the 21 units left, most of those are at the 20-year age or higher. They're running at a SEER 6 or 7, which we're at SEER 14 and 15. So you can see there's quite a bit of a difference in that. So it's part of our infrastructure input there. But this is a budget that we try to really hold the line on. However, when things break and they have to be fixed, this is where those funds come out of for operating costs for public facilities. Again, we also have an increase in our utilities here, as well as a cost for our benefit packages for both part-time that are working for us as well as full-time. We also will see an increase in revenues. That's because we just added a cell site to the George Ingles Equestrian Event Center as part of that project. Included in the three, just as a footnote, is that part of the three new cell sites that were included, and we've identified those in those budget numbers this year. We also received a $20,000 cash contribution towards capital improvement for each of those facilities in which the cell sites were installed. And the cell companies have paid those fees now. Animal control services, you'll find that estimated year-end expenditures are slightly lower than amended budget. You basically do some salary benefit savings there. The 17-18 budgets for expenditures were increasing by about 2.7%. That is mainly related to pension and some utility costs associated to those two line items. And the 17-18 revenue side, you'll see a decrease of about 3% due to what we call the cycling dog license renewal program. I think Gina mentioned it earlier in her presentation. Our revenues were up higher in this fiscal year ending. That's because you have an option to buy a 1, 2, or 3-year license. We had an increase in 3-year licensing for rabies vaccination. That's going to increase our revenues. However, as we cycle down the next couple of years, those revenues will not, because people will not be buying 3-year licenses. So that's why we readjusted our revenues down a little bit to make up for that. And that the bottom line was driven up based on our rabies vaccination requirement for licensing. Now, as we move from there, any questions related to that?
Yeah, I can try.
Yeah.
On building maintenance, that under your department, you maintain all city buildings, city-owned buildings.
That's correct.
But it was mentioned under the water fund that there was some expenses for some of the buildings in the yard of the public works yard.
I believe those are related to the maintenance yard, public works maintenance yard section.
Okay, so is that maintenance cost in the water fund where I first thought you had allowed for that? Or is there?
But those costs are not part of this budget of the 737. Those are charged directly to the water fund budget because that's an enterprise fund. So any costs associated to the water fund would be charged to those facilities in which that cost would have occurred from. So what's excluded from here would be those buildings that are funded or operated under the water fund. They are not part of this,
which would be
737.
Buildings in the public works yard.
That's correct. Not all of those buildings. We have the Parks Department has an operating building there, but most of the buildings there are all public works, which is that includes the water department.
Okay, and that maintenance then is charged to water fund.
That's correct.
And not to this.
Right. So for example, if they had a capital outlay for a new air conditioning unit, it wouldn't be charged here, it would be charged to the water fund.
Thank you.
Yeah, Brian, looking at these, your budget and the revenues, are you looking at, will we be looking at increasing the user fees in June for July 1st to help offset these revenues, these additional costs?
Yeah, you'll see, I mean, we don't have the full projections on it, but you'll see a cost of living or CPI increase of about 2.7% across the board for all fees associated that are part of our approved resolution. And then we've included a few additional fees for some of our operational costs, particularly in the 737 fund.
And those increase in fees are not reflected into this?
No.
Thank you.
Or what the delta difference would be is not reflective in here. I think we moved to public works after this.
Good afternoon. We'll start off with the engineering. In that department, we're gonna have a slight decrease in our estimated from budget to what we're gonna spend, primarily due to one unfilled position that was partially unfilled at the beginning of the year and now at the end of the year. So that's really where the savings is, not much, and we're having a minor increase in the budget based off of minor pension cost increases. In regards to public works inspection, we had some increases related to what was the budget versus what we're year-end projecting, primarily to some pension costs, also from overtime we've done related to some capital improvement projects. That's primarily where those costs have come from. But for the most part, we're going to remain pretty flat from budget to year-end. And then we do have some increases projected, mainly in regard to some training we're going to be doing, and some projections, potentially some increased overtime for some other projects we're planning to do during 2017-18. Under parkway maintenance, that was the projected budget was $71,000. We're projecting to spend only about $69,000. Very minor difference in that. We are intending to bump up that budget to about $27,000, and primarily because we plan to do more. Want to prepare and budget to do more work in relation to parkway maintenance. The anticipation, we want to use more CRC crews for weed abatement. Hopefully they're available. And also to purchase our own. We're purchasing additional equipment. Ours is quite old and beat up, so we're purchasing a lot of weed eaters, chainsaws, definitely a lot more herbicide. We definitely use a lot more herbicide than we normally budgeted, and we plan to kind of beef that up. Again, if we have decent rains again, we know that growth. The chemical is a big factor in us being able to keep those weeds at bay. It has a very good effect on that, so that's one of our main defenses against keeping the weeds down. So that's where those increased costs will probably come from, most likely to occur. Under street maintenance, we again are expecting to come under budget. We're budgeted $680,000. We're expecting to come back to $630,000. And that was mainly, we got a little late start on some of our street striping because we initially had a contractor that we let them go because they didn't perform very well. Then we started up again. So we are trying to ramp that up and try to accomplish our actual target by the end of the year. But so these numbers may rise, but it's not a whole lot. Same thing with our patching. We actually had a benefit in that our contractor that we hired was out there doing work. They spent many months not invoicing us, and when it came time to invoicing us, they couldn't document what they did effectively, so we got basically a discount on what they did since they couldn't effectively document what they did. So some of that reduction is actually is caught up in there in the lower number. But again, in the future, we do plan to be very aggressive on doing next year's budget, street striping and pothole patching. We're going to continue that work. The increase in what we're requesting is mainly we're having to do a lot more traffic light improvements, a lot of call-outs we aren't anticipating budgeting-wise. So we've done a little bit of increasing, anticipating those are going to continue to occur this next year. The traffic signal maintenance, that's been an issue. But also we're going to purchase some safety equipment and some street supplies, just stuff we use year-round. A little bulk up a little bit more so we're ready to prepare for the year. Storage operations, that is pretty much less, mainly because we haven't used as much contractual services as we normally do in the past. That's where that difference comes about. We're projecting a very minor increase in that, but basically remain flat. And this current year, the existing fund balance is enough. We don't need an increase in revenue or transfer from the general fund. And let's see, water operations. Currently, again, we've had the amended budget was $9.3 million. We're estimating about $8 million again. About $900,000 of that difference is simply resulting from the fact that we have the current working relationship with the city of Corona, who is taking some of our contractual obligation for the Arlington Salter. So that's about $900,000 to $1 million. That basically is, we're not having to foot that bill, but every year we will contractually in our budget put the max amount. If Corona comes in and does what they've done the last 2 years, and then we'll have a basically $900,000 million savings in that regard, which again, part of that gets eaten away because then we're basically pumping more water, so there's a difference in cost there. So our net difference is usually about $600,000 if they use about 1,000 acre feet. We're trying to get them to use more, and we can use more of our own resources, and we have savings that way. So But right now, we're projecting, again, Corona's going to take water from Arlington Salter in 2017-18, and they've so far taken about 1,000 acre-feet each year. So, but we're trying to see if they're willing to take more. So as they take more, we can benefit from that, certainly because we can use more of our own potable groundwater. That's what we're going to keep trying to push, so we'll keep doing that. But that's why we continually see year to year that difference, that gap of well more than $1 million. It's not that we're trying to over budget, it's simply that we plan for what we expect to do, and we are fortunate to end up not having to spend that money. We will have some expenditures that we're going to beef up on, both in the water and sewer. Again, we have been pretty reactionary to activities in both funds, primarily water though, because it's been so cash-strapped. Now that we've done the rate increases, we are going to continue what council approved last year we completed, which was our hydrant valve maintenance program. So now that we've done that, we're going to go through and do half the system every year. So we'll keep rotating it. One half of the city that's on 15 freeway, the other half the other side the other year. So we're not going to redo everything every year. It's been about $350,000. To do everything, it's about $150,000. So we're going to make sure that's an ongoing program, so our facilities, our equipment are ready to go when we need them. So there's money there. We're, again, continuing our GIS maintenance program and bulking up what we've achieved so far. And again, another thing, program the council approved was developing our GIS program. That is something I intend to bring back to demonstrate to the council, show where we're at with that, what our new GIS system looks like and how it functions. And same thing with our new asset management work order system that the council approved. Public Works is currently using that. It's very effective. It's really improved and streamlined our processes and be able to respond to customers. We're still learning from it too. We're making changes to that. We're in the process of integrating parks into that. Next year we're going to add in finance, building and safety. We're going to try to integrate any portion of the city where work orders are relevant in communicating with the customers. So again, I'm going to come back with that at a future council meeting to show you that program, demonstrate how it looks, what we see on our side, what the customer sees, and show you how that program works. But we have been using it now for the last 2 months, and it's been very well received by employees in the field and management for being able to actually follow what the crews are doing almost on an hourly basis, seeing what they do and what they see out there. So I definitely want to bring it back to show the council what we've achieved with that. Then we have quite a bit of costs that we incur, about $30,000 in training costs between water and sewer. That's going to be broken up into. We have a lot of new staff at the yard that need training related to safety and operation of equipment, etc. So we're going to bring in a consultant who's going to train pretty much everybody. Some guys will be a refresher, others will be brand new. So we want to make sure we get those things done. And then again, we have some miscellaneous water equipment that we need to purchase and replace. But it's small equipment, it's not capital related, which is more like trucks or larger equipment. And those things are dealt with in the CIP budget. And then the sewer operations fund, again, pretty stable fund there. We budgeted $5.8 million. We're coming in probably projecting about 4.8. Again, we're actually projecting for next year's budget to go about 5.6, about a little less than $200,000 less, primarily because in the past we had been very conservative, or I guess liberal in our assumption of what we might have as costs related to RCRA. Now we've had a couple of years, especially for myself, I'm more comfortable bringing that number down, and because our costs have been fairly consistent from RCRA. So we've just reduced our overall assumed contract costs with RCRA down a little bit. Those costs could come down again, depending on whether the treatment plant comes online with the expansion in December. Those costs could go down even more. But again, we don't reflect that here. So we did have a small increase in contractual costs, but there are some internal costs that were increasing related to training, et cetera, that I talked about previously with water. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, Dick, you go first.
Thank you. Chad, I'm going to bounce back over here to the parkway maintenance. I know you budgeted your expenditure there for CRC crews. Did you compare that with the cost of increasing Brightview contract to handle those so we don't have to buy this equipment versus let them use their own on a contractual basis, or just go with the CRC? I mean, as equipment goes, equipment gets it depreciates, it doesn't appreciate, so you're gonna always continue to replace small motors and chain in that thing. And I'm just thinking, if we can get a better deal at Brightview, let them burn up their own equipment. I'm just asking if that was part of the equation there.
We didn't look at that analysis. Again, primarily we're looking at all the areas that Brightview doesn't currently contract for. And we can certainly look at that as far as something, again, it really depends on what more money is available in the general fund to fund that type of operation, or and because that's the issue, is you're already paying employees to be out there. You're adding a little bit of equipment to it and just to maintain those parkways or areas they have to do that are not within Brightview's current contract. Again, we can certainly look at those possibilities of doing certain areas. For example, as discussion as far as tonight's council meeting, one of the things we talked about and are proposing to do on North Drive is if we go through and do the upgrade like we just did on Hamner as far as the median, is we put that entire area between Crestview and California on Brightview's contract, maintenance contract, so that it keeps up. Now we've invested the time and dollars to potentially upgrade it, make it look nice. We want to make sure it gets maintained in an effective manner. And one of the suggestions that Brian talked about was using that contract cost, and that's what we're proposing to do. But I have not looked at using Brightview on a to-go basis because it would be a case-by-case basis depending on the issue, who calls, and the reality is unless we do a contract that specifies either certain areas or whole house city, we would be having to have them give us a price on a section or an area that the customer's calling about that we need to go out and maybe assist, or it's just an area we plan to maintain on a routine basis, maybe once a quarter, once a year. We go through after the rains, we just blow and go. And so it's a little difficult to get a set pricing on that. It's because a lot of the areas we're going to maintain is the stuff where the weeds just pop up.
Okay, well,
versus the maintained landscapes.
And the areas I bring this up because the CRCs or crews are seasonal. Right now, good luck, they're probably busy and very busy. Their fire crews are. So I'm just trying to be consistent so that to look at that rather than us having to, as a city, have to buy these small motors and stuff, that you let the contract agency handle that. So I'm just, if it was looked into.
Keep in mind, we primarily do most of the weed abatement ourselves. We use CRC to fill in small gaps where we can't get to it. A lot of times we use them in the backyard trails where it's just overgrown, and we let them just spend the day going through there. But the day-to-day frontage areas, we pretty much deal with all those.
I'm just trying to.
Nope.
Okay. And then I'll go back into street maintenance. I didn't see any note about street sweeping. In the past, we've always allocated around $30,000 a year. Is that for street sweeping? Is that into this?
Yes,
it's in there. Okay.
Nothing got taken out.
Okay. And then back to water operations. The one thing, and you know this well, as what's always gotten to our problem over the last couple of years or years is calibration of these meters. The meters that were installed under our water management system, this GIS system and the whole program, are we calibrating those, or is that any type of calibration in this budget so that we know that the meter that's sitting in front of my house is accurate or calibrated properly? I mean, are there inspections on those?
Traditionally, a meter maintenance program, usually only, and we don't have one that are about that, in that meters tend to last for residential uses about 15 to 20 years. And normally you just have a replacement program where you would rotate certain parts of the city and replace a few thousand each year. When it gets up, so you have to replace it about year 50, because that's the length of the battery. That also is kind of where water tails out. But traditionally, no, it's very hard to monitor residential homes to find out if they are starting to peter off and fail. Over time, meters will fail, where they're reducing their efficiency. There's certainly ones that we know clearly where they fail because now they're zero read. We go out and replace those. But majority of our meters are residential meters. There isn't a maintenance program. It's simply replace when you know it, replace.
Well, and that's what I'm asking in your budget. There's no maintenance.
Nothing like that. That'd be a future capital replacement part when we get to that point. Right now,
and that may be down the road, but
yeah,
we dealt with this through RICWA. We dealt with it with the LMDs, and the meter situation that we have there, and we need to ensure the residents that their meters are somewhat accurate, and they're relying on us so that when they get their bills, they don't get a crazy bill, or if they're being underbilled or unbilled, and we're not. So that's what I'm asking, is there in this, we should be looking at some kind of calibration program for these meters. And if you don't do it this budget, I mean, I would ask that you look at it future. Those meters have been in at least 5 years, most of the city?
6 years.
6 years?
The way it would work, just so you understand, is that, again, we wouldn't have a calibration program for any meters that are probably an inch or smaller. It just doesn't make financial sense. What you would commonly do in other places I've been to is that we would have a program for usually the high water users, to identify them, that are 2-inch size or more. Because those meters you could pull out, send to a company, and have them tested and verify they're okay. If they're good, you put them back in. If not, they either get repaired or you put a new one in. Because to be candid, most of the error is always in the resident's favor. The meters don't fail fast because the mechanical device doesn't spin quicker and make you pay more. It actually stops spinning waterscapes around the meter device, and we actually collect less. And to your point is that we want to make sure we're collecting the proper amount. Realistically, it's understood that in industry-wide is that for residential meters, for small meters, there's no functional way financially to have a maintenance program. With our AMI system, it does help us to get more information at a more time matter if we see that meters are going to a zero read, or if they significantly come off their normal average, it'll give us a warning, say, hey, something's wrong here, and we can go investigate, hey, see what's going on. So,
So at least there is some type of inspection.
Right.
Okay.
But other than that, we do have in probably year 10 of our current metering program is when we'll start looking at potentially replacing a batch of meters citywide until we get all of them replaced, and then the 15-year cycle starts over again.
Question on hydrants. What's our count on hydrants that we've serviced and exercised?
I believe it's 1,440.
Okay. And that's all of them? Well, it's not quite all of them.
Well, as far as I know, through the system, they tested everything that they found.
Okay.
Said they found more than we originally thought we had.
Okay.
So the assumption is yes, but again, as they go through, they may find another one they didn't realize was hidden somewhere because we had some weeds. So I will never say they 100% got them all, but we certainly got more than we thought we did, than we had, excuse me.
And then we'll do half the city 1 year, and then exercise the hydrants on the other half the following year.
Yeah, and they'll do hydrants and valves all at the same time while they're out there on one half of the city. And then the next fiscal year, they'll do the other half of the city.
And then our valves are all mapped, excuse me.
Yes, and that was the goal, was they tried to find every valve. We know they didn't, because some of them were either paved over, but we're aware they exist, or they couldn't find them because they happened to be in a trail, and when they went through, they just didn't see them, but we know they exist. So part of what we're doing is, before they start the next phase, the next contract, is we're trying to identify those areas where we know clearly, and now that we have everything mapped, you're missing items here, you're missing items there, and we'll go out with them at those times when we get those areas, say, okay, let's find it together. So we're gonna help them problem solve in those areas because we know our system that there should be something there. That includes hydrants and or valves.
Okay. But we're gonna get to the point where our valves now are exposed and we can find them.
Yes.
This is just a tiny little thing. Kevin, if you want to jump in on this, help me. What are your costs on herbicides? That we need to finish up looking at the herbicides that we use, cost-wise.
I think Brian has developed something, haven't you, Brian?
And I don't want to take it any further because it's not all a budget issue, but I just want to press on that a little bit.
You're going to receive a position paper on that
Okay,
by the end of this week. Start first.
good. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. For the Planning Department in the Planning Division, we're coming in under budget, a little bit under budget for this fiscal year projected, and projected to have an an increase next year relative to the increased pension and benefit costs that you've heard repeated through the evening. In the Code Enforcement Division, we are coming in, again, a little under budget for this year. There's a projection next year for a 35% increase. That's due to the addition of a new part-time code enforcement officer and all of the pension and benefit costs with that position, plus contractual services for legal advice that we get pertaining to our code enforcement cases. In the Building and Safety Division, we actually are coming in above the budget for this fiscal year in the general fund, and that's due to the fact that two of the positions were not being completely funded through the general fund as they should have been, and that's been corrected and funds have been reallocated, and that will stay consistent next year. So from the amended budget from this year to next year, there's a 7% increase for that additional cost to the general fund, and then health and benefit costs related to that.
Do we have money in the budget to turn the air conditioning on? I don't think so.
We'll move on to the proposed supplemental requests. These requests are not included in the budget that we just presented to you. And we'll start off with Parks, Recreation, and Community Services.
Thank you, Gina. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, these are supplemental requests, as Gina pointed out, are not part of the budget, but are items in which the staff would like to request funding for, or at least have discussion on. This particular first item that is being proposed adds 2 part-time personnels, what I call citywide beautification and trail maintenance. This allows for the horse trail maintenance to be completed on weekends. The program would consist of us actually using our court-assigned workers, but supervised in the city. It would allow us to have 2 personnel, one for equipment, one for also to help and assist with transportation. We do have a van that we can use to transport them on the weekends. This would provide us, we believe, up to a 10-man crew that we could put on the streets and help working on trails and make up for those particular areas that our volunteer program cannot get to, or the Public Works Department, Parks Department, or contractor cannot get to. This also allows us to do beautification and looking at entryways, weed abatement, removal of stickers off of signs, and really to beautify the city, its entryways, and its public right-of-way areas. They would be completely supervised, as opposed to in the past we've used this program before, but we've taken them out and then we've left them and they become unsupervised. This would allow them to be supervised the whole way through. This is really just to pick up the weekend type of traffic. We work with the Public Works Department and try and hit hot areas that need to be worked on. If equipment needs to be brought in or materials dropped off, then we would use that, we would grade it and put these particular assigned volunteer employees to work. This would not change what isn't done currently right now, but this would be to augment the program. I'm a strong believer that right now our trail system throughout the city is sort of a forgotten stepchild right now, and I believe that we need to put some more emphasis in trying to keep it up and maintain it. These crews could also be used during disaster activity or on weekends where assigned if we needed them as well during that time. But we have a lot of areas, both Chad and myself were chasing our tails basically to try and stay up with, we had a rainy season, so weeds are everywhere. But to stay up on top of that, as much as what Chad is putting into it and what we are or our contractor is, we just can't stay up with it. But there's a point in time where we have entryways that just need some attention to it, and we just can't get to it. So this would allow us to bring 2 people on in the beginning of the fiscal year. We've already talked to the county about a specific assigned crew for this. This would not take the place of the CRC crew, which could be used as well as city staff. This would actually be replacing, adding to our arsenal to be able to deal with beautification throughout the community. With that, I'll answer any questions you might have, or I'll move on to my next supplemental request.
Good. Okay, you said that these guys would be able to supervise up to 10 workers.
That's correct.
Are we going to be able to get 10 workers at a time? Because I thought you said last year we weren't able to get that many because of the release program that the county jail has.
That did affect us last year. However, we're finding that weekend crews are starting to come back, and we would be making that request to the Sheriff's Department, which actually is the one who organizes that, and we would go through that program and ask for a 10-person crew. If we got an 8-person crew, we would be happy.
Okay, and that includes all horse trails, not just the entryways and...
No, we would be looking at, this is really kind of a comprehensive program to start at one end and finish at the other end. But in between, we would be working on entryways and wherever we needed to go to, wherever we're behind everywhere else between public works and parks. This would help fulfill and backfill some of those areas that are not getting, I keep sinking in my chair as he goes down. But it would be allow us to be able to backfill where we're not getting those areas cleaned up as we are right now. And part of this, if there's graffiti in the right-of-way area, we could remove some of that. I mean, a trail fence that is down. I know that the Norco Horsemen's Association helps us quite a bit, but even with what they do, there's a lot of areas within the city that are just we're not able to get to. And we probably won't be able to get to if we don't do something. Thank you.
Brian, I have a quick question too. Will this group and these workers be able to coordinate with organizations in town that have planned cleanup events as well?
One of the things that we can do that, I'm not so sure I want to mix our court sign people with all the volunteers. That'd be something I have to think about. But as far as we've talked about doing a community cleanup day, we've done this in the past. They've been very successful, but they would be part of that, helping on that weekend community cleanup day. Several years ago, we worked with several groups within the community, and we did North Drive. And at the end of the day, and actually Waste Management was a sponsor in that, and it was a very successful community gathering and day of appreciating your neighborhood, and turned out really well. A lot of great effort from a lot of different people, and I could see us making something like that an annual event. These people would help with that. This crew would help with that. We're not pulling other people in to do that type of work.
Thank you.
Brian, so you're setting aside $31,000 for the year?
Yeah, that's part-time staff.
That's 2 part-time staffers. Is that any equipment?
Basically, right now, we have equipment, and we also have a trailer we can pull behind the van that allows us to, it has our weed eaters and other equipment, tools, and stuff that we have. That would be it. Based on my discussions with the superintendent of parks, he feels we're okay for this year. Next year, we may have to add more tools as they do, and these would be more of the small tool, hand tool type of equipment.
Would that incur any additional safety measures? Because we're going to put these crews along the streets.
Yeah, everyone would have to be vested. We would have to also do some signage out there in the right of way to warn people that we have a crew working in the trail.
Okay, and how many hours a day are you looking at?
We're looking, basically this particular allows us to put in from a beginning, sign in, sign out, that we're looking at about 7 to 8 hours of actual labor time for the crews.
For the crews, per day then, or?
Yes, per day.
So you got 2 days, or?
Yes,
just doing one?
Saturday, Sunday.
Saturday, okay. Thank you.
That's the objective right now, is to have a Saturday, Sunday.
I have a hard time believing you're going to get it done for $31,000.
That's just basically on our salaries for part-time, where we might come in a little bit later, but that's what we're looking at right now. item that we have is with the emergence of the George Ingalls Equestrian Event Center, we have slowly migrated to that facility as an event center. Right now, our facility supervisor is trying to cover really a facility that is operating 7 days a week. What we were proposing is to bring someone in to assist us in helping with the coordination of the various clients that come in. And this would also include the activities from inspections to working with the various departments for those inspections at Ingalls. And that would include working with the fire department, fiscal support, making sure business licenses are pulled for vendors, etc. But also is to help us with the insurance and those type of things that we have when the client does come in, as well as our day starts sometimes usually from 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and we are sometimes not out of there until midnight. We cannot cover that span fully. And with some of our particular clients that we are starting to come to our facility and have interest, have particular special needs and they need to be attended to. And so this allows us to bring someone on to assist our facility supervisor and fill in those gaps, particularly on weekends and during the week when we have various clients. It also allows us to try to expand our cost center for those hours in which we're not really booking anything out now, which are the weekdays. Weekends we're pretty solid, almost all the way through 2018 right now. But we still have gaps that we want to fill in. The key for us at Ingalls is the multiple day events. That's where when we can attract and bring multiple day events in, we have the ability to be able to generate a higher level of revenue, and we also create economic activity within the community that isn't necessarily present to the same extent when we do a one-day event. This position would be a part-time position, and it would help us in assisting that person in their office duties as well as in their field duties. The next item I have, unless you have any questions.
So, I'll make a comment and it'll probably bleed into the next one, is that with the increase in workload and activities up there, obviously we're selling more, we're doing more bookings. That could not this cost be spread so that it's neutral, that you're anticipating 3,000 in revenues. Does the opportunity exist to just cover that total of $15,000?
We have 2 fee scheduled items that will be coming before you that we'll be talking about. And one of those is a proposed grounds fee, which we do not charge right now. And that's an upcoming slide. So if you want, I can talk to that.
Yeah, or tie
that will
together.
tie into some of the revenues to the expenditures. The next item is a part-time maintenance worker. One, we have a crew up at Ingalls. We're all at 80 plus acres of land, and to try and operate with the staff up there, if we did not have the volunteer assistance that we get, which by the way, our volunteers are spread pretty thin, we would not be able to invite or have the same type of participation from the clients and different groups that are utilizing that facility or renting that facility. Particularly the multi-day events and what it takes for us to do things that would help. We're also getting an increase in usage or requests for stalls. And when we put stalls up or take them down or contract them out, it does take work and labor to be able to coordinate that. And we also do get a workforce crew from the county that assists us there. They are not always the most well-trained in any specific skill or trade. However, they're great for certain labor type of work. We do get some skill trained people at times. What this does is allows this person to help in coordinating that. That frees up my maintenance workers to be able to do the other things that we need to do and stay on top of the maintenance up there. I'm challenged by just staying up with that facility at this point in time. and being able to coordinate it in a sense that when you come there, it's one, safe, and two, it's presentable, it's clean, it's all of those things. And if I'm pulling Keith or Richard or somebody off the tractor to go babysit port workers, I'm losing valuable time. And I just to get things done. And that's why when we're operating at the pace that we are, and the inquiries that we are getting today, although we don't have exact signed contracts, are much different than we had a year ago, because most of the inquiries are for multiple day events. And that's really a key to us. What you don't see in our revenue projections is what does that economic activity mean when people are renting our hotels, using our restaurants, or the rest of the city facilities. And we have seen increases to that. So this position would be, again, a part-time person to help us, particularly during heavy event activities and on weekends. The next item, we do have a new tractor there, but we operate and we have 2 arenas. If you have to have 2 arenas prepped at the same time, one arena is getting worked on, the other one is an old tractor. And our objective here is to put some money aside and to start to put money away for replacement of that tractor so that we have the ability to replace the older tractor. We need 2 pieces of equipment up there, bottom line. I can't take Public Works' tractor because they need it and they have emergencies on the weekends, and it just doesn't work that way. But at some point, even if we were to look at putting money aside, purchasing a used tractor, our particular John Deere, we're spending a lot more money in maintenance trying to keep it up, but we need 2 tractors, that's the bottom line. And that's what this does, this allows us to put some money in the budget to start to depreciate replacement of that vehicle.
Mr. Mayor, can I add to that? Working up there, that tractor has caused an employee an injury. It's the way it was operated because of air, its deficiencies. So Brian, I heartily support you on that. I just think that instead of trying to look for a new one, we can find other avenues other than a brand new $70,000 or $80,000 tractor up there. But
we just need to start a process where we're putting money aside, and then maybe within a year we can start looking at the purchase of one, even if it's a used one through an auction. And we have been very lucky. Our water truck was purchased through an auction process, and it's served us pretty well. And we've had to go in and do some updating to that. But overall, it has turned out very well for us, as opposed to spending $90,000 on a new water truck. So that's what this particular supplemental item is. The next item is the purchase of spider boxes. The Clark Arena, if you're at Horse Week or any of our other events prior to that, you've noticed that the particular facility is growing in activity and usage, and a multi-purpose type of activity. Currently right now, our proposal this evening is for us to take a capital purchase and buy spider boxes and cabling. This would allow us to be able to also rent those back out. Will generate revenue, and it does have about a 3 to 4 year replacement value to it. So the money that you invest in this today will return within 3 to 4 years back to you by the rental of these facilities. Just so you understand, right now, I have to go rent this equipment when I have a vendor coming in, because I don't have enough equipment to support their needs. This revenue would generate right back to your pocket. And we would be able to put enough money aside for replacement with this as well. This particular item is an infrastructure item. It is what I would call on our line of critical discussions. This is for a little over $500,000 for electrical infrastructure that is deficient, and bring it up to current codes at Wayne Macon. It allows us to not have power interruptions for the youth sports groups throughout the season, and also would reduce our ongoing temporary fixes. This also would include the replacement of switchgear at Wayne Macon as well. This provides also technology for us to become more energy efficient with lighting, and it also allows us to step out for future replacement of or lighting at that facility. It also assists us in trying to make sure that we're meeting the very basic needs of safety within that park. The system that is now there dates back to the early 70s. It is 40 years old. It was done many, many years ago by volunteers, and there are some direct issues and concerns the staff has related to bringing the existing backbone into current standards. So this request would be to fund this particular needed and safety infrastructure item. And that concludes supplemental.
Just a question. The posts, we had talked about the additional cost of going with a better lighting system overall, which would be about a couple $100,000 maybe. And I'm just wondering what the cost savings would be if we did, since we're doing this, I know we just replaced the poles, but if we went with the newer system, if the electrical costs, the savings would be worth doing it all at the same time.
We are working on some numbers on that, Councilman, and we could bring that back to you as an information. I don't have the exact numbers, and I'd hate to give you a number that isn't accurate.
I would just like to know, because if we find out in 5 years we save a ton of money and we go to, the best lights available to us right now, I think that might be worthwhile. I don't want any more kids electrocuted or shocked on our fields either.
The one thing is that your light fixtures, your poles we replaced a few years ago, but your light fixtures are relatively old.
Yeah.
In some cases we've replaced those fixtures, but they are not the newest halogen type lights that you see on sports fields, nor are they the newest LED lights, which is your biggest savings per window.
Yeah, I would just like to see what the cost breakdown of that is, see if it's worth it. Thank you.
Brian, I'm surprised that we're sitting here as a supplemental request when this should be already been sitting in front of us for the public safety of the children there that are playing. And that's why, I mean, you got your full electrical engineer's report, and is this going out to bid or anything like that? I mean, it's serious public safety as far as I'm concerned, why it hasn't been done before this. I mean, I think we as a council, most of us all realize that there's an issue there that we need to handle.
We're currently working on the working drawings to actually physically bid it, but based on this dollar figure, our original estimates were even higher, and then we worked with the electrical engineer to do some things to bring those costs down, and we've given him directive to complete all the physical working drawings so this could be bid. We're expecting those in by next week to take it out. In the meanwhile, we have fenced off all of the poles to make sure that there is no physical contact to any of those poles. And in both our electrical engineers estimate that buys us some time to do that, but we need to move quickly. Yes, sir.
Is that used for?
Yeah, and let me go back. I think it's further down the slide. Okay, if you go back 2 more slides, it's 737. This is a request for us to, what we would be doing is adding a new fee. This fee will be centered around the 737 particular budget. This is a grounds fee per vehicle. Basically we would collect a collection and facility infrastructure revenue fee for maintenance of grounds and operations, which is also inclusive of staff, to sustain facility and arenas and to help offset utility cost increases, i.e. water increases that have recently, that facility picks up its cost for. The event grounds fee is only for charged outside of multi-use lease agreements that we have. So if we have a current lease agreement, that would be, it would not include this grounds fee in that. Total revenue projections per year is, and we feel we're being very conservative, is $92,000. And currently, right now, almost every one of our organizations that come in or shows charge a grounds fee. We do not charge a grounds fee. And in our last survey of the facilities that we surveyed like ours, we're probably the only one that does not charge a grounds fee.
So like Horse Week, the fair, they've already got contracts. What happens when the contracts come up?
Then it's a negotiated issue between them and the council, whether that is a condition of that agreement. Currently, right now, the fair has a new agreement. It's not in their agreement.
So you're mainly trying to pinpoint outside groups coming in and stuff?
Well, that's correct.
Got it. Thanks, man.
So you're talking about a grounds fee, you're going to charge the producer of that event the grounds fee, or are you going to talk about collecting the grounds fee on each horse?
There's two ways we can look at this. We can do it, well, this is basically on vehicles, number of vehicles. We looked at it, doing it by animal, which in some cases, that's the way some of the grounds fees are charged, is by number of, if you bring 3 animals up there, you're charged. There's a couple facilities that have as high as $40 per grounds fee per horse in our survey. So what we would be looking at is that we thought it'd be easier to do it by vehicle, and then we would then tack that to the actual permit holder for that. And we would then cross-reference or verify that our numbers are accurate with that person. And that would be part of their ending event bill. Then they can then transfer that cost onto their users if they like. The other option would be that we collect that grounds fee at the gate when they enter in. We set up a booth and a gate position to collect that fee.
Okay, now on the next page, we'll get to it. You said this grounds fee would be per vehicle.
Right.
Now, what's the difference there than the parking fee that you're talking about next?
When collection of additional revenues are associated to a surcharge, when a parking concession fee is charged. In other words, we have people who come in to this now. What is excluded are those particular lease agreements that we have. But what can be looked at in here is that if you are charging a concession parking fee, then we have a right to add a fee to that concession. In other words, we would charge $1 to $5 based on what their fee is being charged, and that fee would then come back to us. Right now, you have people who rent the facility and can charge parking concession, and and that fee goes straight to their pocket. And we do not receive anything from that. It's very unusual for an event facility not to have some sort of cost associated or taxed to that fee that would be charged, particularly related to parking concession.
Right, so the person that's renting the facility would pay us that parking fee.
That's correct.
They would collect it and pay it. Okay, thank you.
And we would work out that understanding ahead of time. In fact, actually, in some cases, we have discussed that with certain people, and what the range may change because they may want us to assist in operation of that parking concession, and if that's the case, then what we would do is we would staff it based on those revenues, Jim.
Thank you, Brian. We're a little past 6 o'clock, so but if you'd like, let's try to just finish up these last couple of little items.
Yes, for Public Works, we're looking at a part-time permit tech. We currently have one full-time permit tech that manages the entire counter, provides admin service for myself, and the senior engineer is in desperate need of assistance. She's very overwhelmed. We think a part-time permit tech would help fill in some of the areas, the busy time that she needs help filled in, so she can keep up with the duties that really just we're doing very well in that department, and we could use assistance, so that's what we're looking for.
What planning is asking for is $75,000 to hire a consultant to update our circulation element. The state requires us to maintain and update our general plan every 10 years. You can either do it paying a lot of money once, or you can do it slowly. And the way we do it are one by one, element by element. And we've been doing it here in Norco element by element. The one element that is in critical need of updating at this point is the circulation element. It was last updated in 2000. And this is the one out of all of them requires some specific surveying and data collection that as staff we don't have the resources to do. So that's it.
Steve, what's the turnaround on that if we were to okay something like that?
We would send out an RFP to get the most cost-effective company that would get us what we need. And it really depends on contract negotiation when we select who that's going to be. The staff's going to have to review it. It's going to have to go to Streets and Trails Commission, Planning Commission, and ultimately City Council. So at this point, I would be hard to say the time.
A year?
Definitely. We could do it.
A year? Okay, all right, so it says. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? If not, Gina, good report. Thank you, thank you.
Just before we conclude.
But I want to thank everybody first. You all did good. Okay, Andy.
There is one final summary schedule here. In all the things that we have requested as through a supplemental process are approved, the net impact of that to the general fund will be additional $611,000. As we previously showed in the presentation, the fund currently is out of balance by $1.3 million, and that brings that number to $1.9 million. Although two of these items, the big ticket items, are one-time items, such as the wind-making electrical project and the circulation element. But it does go to show that, again, our structural deficit in the general fund is increasing. And with respect to the electrical project, this is a good example of what we really need, that demonstrate what we really need in terms of infrastructure funding. This one item alone, if we do it to the extent that we need to do it, could go as high as $1 million. And relying on the general fund to fund items like this is asking for trouble.
Anything else? Thank you very much for your time. We're adjourned.